I was standing in my kitchen sorting through mail when I saw the envelope. It was from DNA Ancestry. I had sent in my sample 6 months earlier. I had not expected much. Just some information about my heritage. Maybe some distant cousins. I was 65 years old. I had been searching for my birth mother my entire life. Every lead had gone nowhere. Every door had been closed. I had accepted that I would never find her. That I would die not knowing where I came from. But I took the test anyway. One last attempt. One final hope. I opened the envelope. I logged into the website. And there it was. A match. Not a distant cousin. Not a third removed relative. A parent-child match. Confidence level 99.9%. My birth mother had taken the test. And the website had connected us. Her name was listed as Patricia Hendricks. I stared at that name. I had never heard it before. But the address. The address made my blood run cold. She lived 3 doors down from me. Patricia Hendricks. The woman in the blue house. The woman I had waved to for 20 years. The woman who brought me cookies at Christmas. The woman who had watched my children grow up. The woman who had been at my husband's funeral. The woman who had lived 3 doors down from me for 2 decades. Was my mother. And she had never said a word. My name is Eleanor, and I am 67 years old now. This story begins 2 years ago when I discovered the truth. But really it begins 65 years before that. When I was born. When I was given away. When my mother made a choice that would haunt both of us for the rest of our lives. I need to start at the beginning. The beginning I did not know until recently. The beginning my mother finally told me. After 65 years of silence. After 20 years of living 3 doors away. After a lifetime of secrets. She finally told me everything. And what I learned broke me. And healed me. And changed everything I thought I knew about love and sacrifice and shame and forgiveness. But let me start with what I knew. What I had always known. I was adopted. My parents Harold and Diane told me when I was 7 years old. They said I was special. That they had chosen me. That I was wanted. That I was loved. They said my birth mother had been very young. That she could not take care of me. That she had made the loving choice to give me to a family who could. They said they did not know who she was. That it was a closed adoption. That the records were sealed. They said if I ever wanted to search for her when I was older they would support me. But they said I might never find her. And I needed to be prepared for that. I said I understood. But even at 7 years old I felt it. The absence. The hole. The question that would follow me my entire life. Who was she? Where did I come from? Why did she give me away? My parents were wonderful. They loved me. They raised me well. I had a good childhood. I went to school. I had friends. I played piano. I was on the swim team. I was happy. Or as happy as an adopted child can be. Because there was always that question. Always that wondering. Always that sense of not quite belonging. Not because my parents made me feel that way. But because I made myself feel that way. I would look at my parents and think we do not look alike. I would see families with biological children and think they have something I do not have. They know where they come from. They know their history. Their medical history. Their ancestry. They have a story that goes back generations. And I had nothing. Just a blank space where my origin should be. When I was 18 I started searching. I went to the adoption agency. I asked for my records. They said they were sealed. I asked if they could contact my birth mother. Ask if she would be willing to meet me. They said they would try. They sent a letter. It came back. Returned to sender. They said my birth mother had moved. Left no forwarding address. They said there was nothing more they could do. I tried other avenues. I hired a private investigator. He found nothing. I joined adoption reunion registries. I posted on message boards. I searched public records. Birth announcements. Hospital records. Nothing. Every lead was a dead end. Every hope was crushed. I spent years searching. And I found nothing. Eventually I gave up. I was 30 years old. I was married. I was starting my own family. And I decided I needed to let it go. I needed to accept that I would never know. That my birth mother did not want to be found. Or that she was dead. Or that the records were truly lost. I needed to make peace with the not knowing. So I did. Or I tried to. I had 3 children. 2 daughters and a son. I raised them. I loved them. I gave them the childhood I had. Stable. Loving. Full. But I also told them their story. I told them I was adopted. I told them I did not know my birth mother. I told them that biology is not what makes a family. Love is what makes a family. And they believed me. Because it was true. My parents. Harold and Diane. They were my family. They were the ones who raised me. Who loved me. Who shaped me? Biology did not matter. Except it did. It always did. Because I still wondered. I still had questions. And as I got older, those questions got louder. When I was 50, my mother Diane got sick. Cancer. She fought for 2 years. But she did not make it. She died when I was 52. My father Harold died a year later. Heart attack. Sudden. He was there one day and gone the next. And I was alone. I was an only child. I had no siblings. My parents were gone. And I felt unmoored. Untethered. Like I had lost my anchor. My husband Richard tried to comfort me. My children tried to be there for me. But I felt this deep, aching loneliness. This sense of being completely alone in the world. Because the people who had chosen me, who had made me their daughter, were gone. And I had no one else. No biological connection to anyone. I started searching again. I was 55. I had more resources now. More technology. DNA testing was becoming a thing. I took a test. I waited for results. I got them. Distant cousins. People I did not know. People who did not know me. No close matches. No parents. No siblings. Nothing. I tried again with a different company. Same results. I tried ancestry websites. I built family trees based on the distant cousins. I traced lines. I made connections. And I got nowhere. I spent years doing this. Years searching. Years hoping. And I found nothing. And then I moved. Richard and I had lived in the same house for 30 years. We raised our kids there. But it was too big. Too full of memories. We decided to downsize. We found a small house in a quiet neighborhood. A ranch-style home. Perfect for 2 people. We moved in when I was 63. We met the neighbors. There was a young couple next door. A family with teenagers across the street. And an older woman 3 doors down. Her name was Patricia. She was probably in her early 80s. She lived alone. She was kind. Quiet. She kept to herself mostly. But she would wave when she saw us. She brought us cookies when we moved in. She said, "Welcome to the neighborhood. I hope you will be happy here." I thanked her. I thought she seemed nice. I thought nothing more of it. Over the next 2 years I saw her occasionally. She would be in her garden. Or getting her mail. Or sitting on her porch. We would wave. We would exchange pleasantries. "How are you? Nice weather. Have a good day." Simple neighborly interactions. Nothing deep. Nothing meaningful. Just polite exchanges between people who happened to live on the same street. And then I took the DNA test. My last attempt. My final hope. I did not expect anything. I had taken tests before. I had gotten nothing before. But the technology was better now. More people were testing. Maybe this time would be different. I sent in my sample. I waited 6 months. I forgot about it. And then the email came. "Your results are ready." I logged in. I looked at my ethnicity estimate. British. Irish. A little Scandinavian. Nothing surprising. And then I looked at my DNA matches. And there it was. Parent-child relationship. Patricia Hendricks. I stared at the screen. I read it again. Parent-child relationship. Confidence 99.9%. Patricia Hendricks. I knew that name. I knew that person. She lived 3 doors down. I stood up. I sat down. I stood up again. I could not breathe. I could not think. This could not be real. This could not be right. There had to be a mistake. But I looked at the information again. Patricia Hendricks. Born 1939. That would make her 83. The right age to be my mother. I was born in 1958. She would have been 19. The right age. I looked at her profile. She had not filled in much information. Just her name. Her birth year. Nothing else. But it was her. It had to be her. I walked to the window. I looked down the street. I could see her house. The blue house. 3 doors down. My mother lived 3 doors down. And she had known. She had to have known. You do not move 3 doors down from your biological daughter by accident. You do not live there for 20 years by accident. She knew. She had always known. And she had never said a word. I did not know what to do. I sat with this information for 3 days. I did not tell Richard. I did not tell my children. I just sat with it. I replayed every interaction I had ever had with Patricia. Every wave. Every smile. Every conversation. Had there been signs? Had there been hints? Had she been watching me? Studying me? Knowing? I remembered the day we moved in. She had brought cookies. She had welcomed us. She had looked at me. Really looked at me. I had thought she was just being friendly. But now I wondered. Had she been looking at her daughter? Had she been seeing the babies she gave away 63 years earlier? All grown up. Living 3 doors down. I remembered other moments. Times when I had been in my garden and looked up to see her watching me from her porch. Times when I had seen her at the mailbox at the same time as me and she had seemed nervous, flustered. Times when she had asked me questions. Do you have children? Are you happy here? Do you like the neighborhood? I had thought she was just making conversation. But now I wondered, had she been trying to know me? Trying to learn about my life? Trying to see if I was okay? Without ever revealing who she was. I felt anger rising. How could she? How could she live 3 doors down from me and never say anything? How could she watch my life? Watch my children grow up? Watch my husband die? And never tell me who she was? What kind of person does that? What kind of mother does that? I wanted to confront her. I wanted to march down to her house and demand answers. But I was also afraid. Afraid of what she would say. Afraid of why she had hidden. Afraid of the truth. On the 4th day I told Richard. I showed him the DNA results. I said the woman 3 doors down is my birth mother. He stared at the screen. He said, "Are you sure?" I said 99.9% sure. He said, "Oh my God, Eleanor." I said, "I know." He said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I do not know." He said, "You have to talk to her." I said, "I know. But I do not know what to say." He said, "Start with the truth. Tell her you know. See what she says." I said, "What if she denies it?" He said, "She cannot deny DNA." I said, "What if she does not want to talk to me? What if she has been hiding for a reason?" He said, "Then you deserve to know that reason. After 65 years you deserve answers." I said, "You are right." He said, "Do you want me to come with you?" I said, "No. I need to do this alone." I waited 2 more days. And then I walked down the street. It was a Saturday afternoon. I knew she would be home. She was always home on Saturdays. I stood outside her door. My hand raised to knock. My heart pounding. I almost turned around. Almost walked away. But I knocked. I heard footsteps. The door opened. Patricia stood there. She smiled. She said, "Eleanor." "Hello. What a nice surprise." I said, "Can I come in? We need to talk." Her smile faltered. She said, "Of course. Is everything okay?" I said, "No. Everything is not okay." She stepped aside. I walked in. I had never been inside her house before. It was neat, clean, decorated simply. There were photos on the walls. I glanced at them as I walked past. I did not recognize anyone. We sat in her living room. She sat in a chair. I sat on the couch. There was a long silence. Finally I said, "I took a DNA test." Her face went pale. I said, "It matched me with you. Parent-child relationship. 99.9%. She did not say anything. I said, "You are my birth mother." She closed her eyes. She nodded. I said, "How long have you known?" She said, "Since the day you moved in." I said, "You knew. You knew I was your daughter. And you never said anything." She said, "I could not." I said, "Why not?" She said, "Because I gave up that right." I said, "What does that mean?" She said, "I gave you away, Eleanor. I have no right to claim you now." I said, "I have been searching for you my entire life." She looked at me. Tears in her eyes. She said, "I know." I said, "How do you know?" She said, "Because I have been watching you." I said, "For how long?" She said, "For 20 years. I stood up. I said, "You have been watching me for 20 years. You moved 3 doors down from me. You watched my life. You watched my children. You watched my husband die. And you never told me who you were." She said, "I wanted to. Every single day I wanted to." I said, "But you did not." She said, "No. I did not." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because I was ashamed." I said, "Of what?" She said, "Of giving you away. Of being the kind of person who gives away her child. Of not being strong enough to keep you." I said, "I deserved to know." She said, "I know." I said, "You had no right to keep this from me." She said, "I know." I said, "I spent my entire life wondering who you were. Where I came from. Why you gave me away. And you were 3 doors down. You could have told me at any time. And you chose not to." She said, "I am sorry." I said, "Sorry is not enough." She said, "I know." I started to leave. She said, "Please. Please do not go. I need to explain." I said, "There is nothing to explain. You are a coward." She flinched. She said, "You are right. I am a coward. But please let me tell you my story. Let me tell you why." I said, "I do not care why." She said, "Please, Eleanor. I have waited 65 years to tell you this. Please give me a chance." I stopped. I turned around. I said, "Fine. Tell me. And then I never want to see you again." She nodded. She said, "I understand." And then she started talking. She said, "I was 19 years old when I got pregnant. It was 1957. I was in college. I was studying to be a teacher. I had a boyfriend. His name was James. We had been together for 2 years. I loved him. I thought he loved me. We were careful. But not careful enough. When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified. But I told James. I thought we would figure it out. I thought maybe we would get married. Maybe we would keep the baby. Maybe it would be okay. But James panicked. He said we were too young, that we had our whole lives ahead of us, that a baby would ruin everything. He said I needed to take care of it. I said, what does that mean? He said I needed to get rid of it. I said I cannot do that. He said then I was on my own. And he left. He broke up with me. He transferred to a different school. And I never saw him again. I was devastated. But I still had the baby growing inside me. And I had to make a decision. I told my parents. My mother was horrified. She said I had disgraced the family. That I had ruined my life. My father did not speak to me for a week. Then he sat me down. And he said I had two choices. I could have an abortion. Or I could have the baby and give it up for adoption. But I could not keep it. If I kept it, I would be disowned. I would be cut off. I would be on my own. I said I did not want an abortion. He said then I would give the baby up for adoption. And that was final. I tried to argue. I tried to beg. I said I would drop out of school. I would get a job. I would raise the baby on my own. He said no. You will do as you are told. You will have the baby. You will give it away. And you will move on with your life. And we will never speak of this again. I said I cannot give away my baby. He said you do not have a choice. And I did not. I had no money. No job. No support. I was 19 years old. And I was trapped. Patricia paused. She was crying. I sat there. Silent. Stone-faced. She continued. She said I spent the rest of my pregnancy at a home for unwed mothers. It was an awful place. Cold. Institutional. We were treated like we had done something wrong. Like we were shameful. We were not allowed to leave. We were not allowed to contact anyone. We just waited. For our babies to be born. For our shame to be over. I gave birth to you on March 23, 1958. You were perfect. Beautiful. I held you for 2 hours. I memorized your face. Your tiny hands. The way you smelled. I named you Elizabeth. I whispered it to you. I told you I loved you. I told you I was sorry. And then they took you away. I never saw you again. I signed the papers. I went back to school. I finished my degree. I became a teacher. I got married when I was 25. To a man named Robert Hendricks. He was kind. Stable. Safe. I told him about you before we got married. I thought he deserved to know. He said it did not matter. That it was in the past. We tried to have children. But I could not get pregnant. There was damage from your birth. Scarring. The doctors said I would likely never conceive. I was devastated. But Robert said it was okay. He said we would adopt. But I could not do it. I could not raise someone else's child when I had given away my own. So we did not have children. And I spent my entire marriage thinking about you. Wondering where you were. What you looked like. If you were happy. If you hated me. Robert died when I was 62. Cancer. And I was alone. I had no children. No family. Just memories of the daughter I gave away. I thought about searching for you. But I was too afraid. Afraid you would reject me. Afraid you would hate me. Afraid I had no right. So I did nothing. And then one day I was at the grocery store. And I saw you. You were with your husband. You were laughing. You looked happy. And I knew. I knew you were my daughter. I do not know how I knew. But I did. I saw myself in you. In your face. Your mannerisms. The way you laughed. I followed you. I know that sounds terrible. But I did. I followed you to your car. I wrote down your license plate number. I hired a private investigator. I found out your name. Eleanor Martin. I found out where you lived. I found out about your family. Your children. Your life. And I watched from a distance. For years I watched. I would drive by your house. I would see you in your garden. I would see your children playing. And I would think that should have been my life. You should have been my daughter. I should have raised you. But I did not. I gave you away. And I had no right to you now. She paused. She looked at me. She said, and then you moved. I saw the for sale sign. I saw you packing. And I panicked. I thought I was going to lose you again. So I did something crazy. I found out where you were moving. And I bought a house on the same street. 3 doors down. I moved in a month before you did. I watched you move in. I wanted to tell you that day. I wanted to say I am your mother. But I could not. I was too afraid. So I brought you cookies. I welcomed you to the neighborhood. And I watched. For 2 years I watched. I saw you every day. I waved to you. I talked to you. I learned about your life. And I never told you who I was. Because I am a coward. Because I was ashamed. because I thought you were better off not knowing. I sat there. I did not know what to say. I did not know what to feel. I was angry, hurt, confused. But I was also sad. For her. For me. For the life we could have had. I said, why did you take a DNA test? She said, because I hoped you would too. I hoped that maybe you would find me. And then I would not have to tell you. The truth would just reveal itself. And maybe you would understand. Maybe you would forgive me. I said, I do not know if I can forgive you. She said, I understand. I said, you should have told me. The day I moved in. The first time you saw me. You should have told me. She said, I know. I said, you robbed me of 20 years. 20 years we could have had. She said, I know. I said, I do not know if I can ever trust you. She said, I know. I stood up. I said, I need to leave. I need time to think. She said, I understand. I walked to the door. I turned back. I said, what happened to the name? She said, what name? I said, Elizabeth. You said you named me Elizabeth. She said, your adoptive parents changed it. To Eleanor. I said, did you know that? She said, yes. The investigator told me. I said, so you have known my name was Eleanor for 20 years. She said, yes. I said, and every time I introduced myself you pretended it was the first time you heard it. She nodded. I said, you are good at pretending. She said, I have had a lot of practice. I left. I did not speak to Patricia for 2 months. I did not know what to say to her. I did not know how to process what she had told me. Richard said I needed to decide what I wanted. Did I want a relationship with her? Or did I want to walk away? I said I did not know. He said, take your time. But do not let anger make the decision for you. I told my children. I told them I had found my birth mother. That she lived 3 doors down. That she had been there for 20 years. They were shocked. My daughter Sarah said, Mom, that is crazy. I said, I know. My daughter Beth said, are you going to have a relationship with her? I said, I do not know. My son Michael said, do you want to? I said, I do not know. I do not know what I want. I went to therapy. I had not been in therapy in years. But I needed help processing this. I told the therapist everything. She listened. And then she said, it sounds like you are grieving. I said, grieving what? She said, the mother you could have had. The relationship you could have had. The 20 years you lost. I said, I am angry. She said, you can be both. You can be angry and grieving. You can be hurt and also want connection. You can hold multiple truths at once. I said, I do not know if I can forgive her. She said, you do not have to forgive her. But you do have to decide what you want your life to look like going forward. Do you want her in it? Or do you want to walk away? I said, I spent my whole life looking for her. She said, and now you found her. So what do you want to do with that? I did not have an answer. But I thought about it. I thought about it constantly. I thought about all the years I had searched. All the dead ends. All the closed doors. I had wanted so desperately to find my birth mother. To know where I came from. To have that connection. And now I had it. She was 3 doors down. She had always been 3 doors down. And yes, she had lied. She had hidden. She had robbed me of 20 years. But she was here. She was alive. And I could have a relationship with her if I wanted. The question was, did I want to? 3 months after our confrontation, I knocked on her door again. She answered. She looked surprised. She said, Eleanor. I said, can I come in? She said, of course. We sat in the same places as before. I said, I have been thinking. She said, okay. I said, I am still angry. She said, I understand. I said, I do not know if I can forgive you. She said, I do not expect you to. I said, but I want to know you. I want to know my story. I want to know where I came from. She said, I will tell you anything you want to know. I said, why did you really give me away? She said, I told you. My parents. James. I had no choice. I said, there is always a choice. She was quiet. Then she said, you are right. There is always a choice. And I made the wrong one. I should have fought harder. I should have kept you. But I was 19. I was scared. I was ashamed. And I let other people make my decisions for me. And I have regretted it every single day since. I said, do you think about me? She said, every day. Every single day for 65 years. I said, what do you think about? She said, I wonder what kind of person you became. What kind of mother you are. If you are happy. If you ever thought about me. If you hated me. I said, I did think about you. She said, and did you hate me? I said, sometimes. But mostly I just wondered why. She said, I am so sorry, Eleanor. I know that does not fix anything. But I am so sorry. I said, I know. We sat in silence for a while. Then I said, tell me about my father. She said his name was James Whitmore. He was tall. Dark hair. Blue eyes. He was studying engineering. He was smart. Funny. Charming. I thought I was going to marry him. I said, do you know where he is now? She said, no. I never tried to find him. I said, why not? She said, because he abandoned me. He abandoned you. I did not want anything to do with him. I said I might want to find him. She said, that is your choice. But I cannot help you. I do not know where he is. I said, okay. Tell me about my medical history. She said, I am healthy. My parents lived into their 90s. No major health issues. I said, what about James? She said, I do not know. I said, okay. We talked for hours. I asked questions. She answered. Some of the answers hurt. Some of them helped. But I was learning. I was filling in the gaps. I was getting my story. I started visiting Patricia regularly. Once a week. Then twice a week. We would have tea. We would talk. She would tell me about her life. Her marriage. Her career. Her regrets. I would tell her about mine. My childhood. My parents. My children. My life. Slowly we built a relationship. It was awkward at first. We did not know how to be with each other. We did not know what to call each other. She was not Mom. I already had a mom. But she was not just Patricia either. We settled on calling each other by our names. But the relationship was more. It was complicated. It was layered. It was mother and daughter. But also two women who had been strangers. Who were learning each other. Who were building something from nothing. My children were cautious. They did not understand why I was giving her a chance. Sarah said, Mom, she lied to you for 20 years. I said, I know. Beth said, how can you trust her? I said, I do not know if I can. But I want to try. Michael said, just be careful. I said, I will. Richard was supportive. He said, I am glad you are doing this. I said, really? He said, yes. You spent your whole life searching. Now you found her. You deserve to explore this. Whatever it becomes. I said, thank you. He said, just protect yourself. Do not let her hurt you again. I said, I will try. Patricia and I talked about the 20 years. About why she had hidden. She said, every time I saw you I wanted to tell you. But I was afraid. Afraid you would hate me. Afraid you would reject me. Afraid I would lose you again. I said, so you chose to hide. She said yes. And it was the wrong choice. Just like giving you away was the wrong choice. I seem to make a lot of wrong choices when it comes to you. I said yes. You do. She said, I am sorry. I said, I know. One day I asked her why she never remarried after Robert died. She said I could not. I said, why? She said, because I did not deserve to be happy. I said, that is ridiculous. She said, is it? I gave away my only child. I spent my life lying. I hurt the one person I loved most in the world. Why would I deserve happiness? I said, everyone deserves happiness. She said, I do not believe that. I said, you need therapy. She laughed. She said, probably. I said, I am serious. You have been punishing yourself for 65 years. She said, I deserve to be punished. I said, no. You deserve to heal. She looked at me. She said, how can you say that? After what I did to you. I said, because holding on to anger is exhausting. And I am tired. I am tired of being angry. I am tired of wondering. I am tired of searching. I found you. And yes, you hurt me. But you are here. And I would rather have you here than not have you at all. She started crying. She said, I do not deserve your kindness. I said, maybe not. But I am giving it to you anyway. She said, why? I said, because you are my mother. And I have wanted my mother my whole life. And now I have you. And I am not going to waste whatever time we have left. She said, thank you. I said, do not thank me. Just be honest with me from now on. She said, I will. I promise. And she kept that promise. We talked about everything. About her childhood. Her parents. Her pregnancy. The home for unwed mothers. The birth. The adoption. She told me details I had never known. She said the social worker told her I was going to a good family. A couple who could not have children. Who wanted a baby desperately. Who would love me and give me everything she could not. She said that was the only thing that made it bearable. Knowing I would be loved. I said I was loved. My parents were wonderful. She said, I am glad. I said, but I still wished I had known you. She said, me too. I asked her if she had any photos of herself from when she was young. She said yes. She brought out an album. We looked through it together. There were photos of her as a child. As a teenager. In college. I saw myself in her. In her face. Her smile. Her eyes. It was strange. Seeing where I came from. Seeing the genetic blueprint. I showed her photos of me. Of my children. Of my life. She looked at them with such hunger. Such longing. She said, they are beautiful. You did such a good job. I said, thank you. She said, I wish I could have been there. I said, me too. But you are here now. She said, I know. And I am grateful. We started doing things together. We went to lunch. We went shopping. We went to movies. We did normal mother-daughter things. Things we should have been doing for 65 years. It felt good. It felt right. But it also felt fragile. Like it could break at any moment. Like one wrong word could shatter everything. My children slowly came around. Sarah met Patricia. They had tea. Sarah said afterward, "Mom, she seems nice. But I still do not trust her." I said that is fair. Beth met her too. She said she seems sad. Like she is carrying a lot of guilt. I said she is. Michael met her last. He was the most skeptical. But after meeting her, he said, "I get it, Mom. I get why you are giving her a chance." I said thank you. He said she clearly loves you. Even if she did not know how to show it. I said yes. She does. Patricia met my grandchildren. She was nervous. She said, "What if they do not like me?" I said, "They will like you." She said, "What do I say to them?" I said, "Just be yourself." She met them at a family dinner. She brought cookies. The kids loved her. They called her Miss Patricia. She cried when we left. She said, "Thank you for including me." I said, "You are family." She said, "Am I?" I said, "Yes. You are." She said, "I never thought I would hear you say that." I said, "Well, I am saying it. You are my mother. You are their great-grandmother. You are family." She said, "Thank you. Thank you for giving me this chance." We had been building our relationship for about a year when Patricia got sick. She had a cough that would not go away. She went to the doctor. They ran tests. They found cancer. Lung cancer. Stage 4. The doctor said it was advanced. That treatment might buy her some time, but it would not cure her. She had maybe a year. Maybe less. She told me on a Tuesday afternoon. We were having tea in her living room. She said, "I need to tell you something." I said, "Okay." She said, "I have cancer." I felt my stomach drop. I said, "What?" She said, "Lung cancer. Stage 4. I said, "No." She said, "I am sorry." I said, "How long?" She said, "Maybe a year." I said, "We just found each other." She said, "I know." I said, "This is not fair." She said, "I know." I started crying. She said, "Eleanor, it is okay." I said, "It is not okay. I just got you. I cannot lose you now." She said, "You are not losing me. I am still here." I said, "For how long?" She said, "I do not know. But I am here now. And we will make the most of whatever time we have." I said, "I do not want you to die." She said, "I know. But we do not always get what we want." I said clearly. She laughed. Then she started coughing. I got her water. I sat with her. I said, "What do you need?" She said, "I need you to forgive me." I said, "I already forgave you." She said, "No. I need you to really forgive me. To let go of the anger. To make peace with what happened. Because I do not want to die knowing you still hate me." I said, "I do not hate you." She said, "But you are still angry." I said, "Yes. I am still angry. But I am also grateful. Grateful that I found you. Grateful for this year we have had. Grateful for whatever time we have left." She said, "Me too." Patricia started treatment. Chemotherapy. Radiation. It was brutal. She lost her hair. She lost weight. She was exhausted all the time. But she kept fighting. She said she wanted as much time as possible. I took her to appointments. I sat with her during chemo. I made her meals. I cleaned her house. I did everything I could. My children helped too. Sarah came over and read to her. Beth brought her flowers. Michael fixed things around her house. She said, "I do not deserve this kindness." I said, "Yes, you do." She said, "I gave you away." I said, "I know. But you are here now. And we are making up for lost time." She said, "I love you, Eleanor." I said, "I love you too." It was the first time either of us had said it. And it felt right. It felt true. Patricia lived for 18 months after her diagnosis. Longer than the doctors expected. She said it was because she had something to live for. She said she finally had her daughter back. And she was not ready to leave. But eventually her body gave out. She was moved to hospice. I was with her every day. We talked. We reminisced. We made peace. One day she said, "I need to tell you something." I said, "Okay." She said, "I am sorry. For everything. For giving you away. For hiding. For the 20 years we lost. For all of it. I am so sorry." I said, "I know." She said, "Do you forgive me?" I said, "Yes. I forgive you." She said, "Really?" I said, "Really. You made mistakes. But you are human. And you are my mother. And I love you." She cried. She said, "Thank you. Thank you for giving me this chance. Thank you for letting me be your mother. Even for just a little while." I said it was more than a little while. It was enough. She said, "Was it?" I said, "Yes. It was enough." She died 3 days later. I was holding her hand. My children were there. Richard was there. She was surrounded by family. The family she thought she had lost. The family she had found again. We buried her next to Robert. I spoke at the funeral. I told the story. About how she was my birth mother. About how I found her. About the 20 years she lived 3 doors down. About the relationship we built. About the forgiveness we found. People cried. People said it was beautiful. People said she was lucky to have me. I said I was lucky to have her. After she died, I went through her house. I found boxes of things she had kept. Photos of me, taken from a distance. Over the years. Me in my garden. Me with my children. Me at the grocery store. She had been watching me for so much longer than 20 years. She had been watching me for decades. I found journals. Entries about me. About wondering what I was doing. About hoping I was happy. About wishing she had kept me. About regretting her choices every single day. I found the adoption papers. My original birth certificate. With the name Elizabeth. With her name listed as mother. With James Whitmore listed as father. I found letters. Letters she had written to me but never sent. Dozens of them. Letters apologizing. Letters explaining. Letters saying she loved me. I read every single one. And I cried. Because she had loved me. All along. Even when she was hiding. Even when she was lying. She had loved me. And I had never known. I found her will. She left everything to me. Her house. Her savings. Everything. There was a note attached. It said, "This should have been yours all along. You should have grown up in this house. You should have had this life. I am sorry I took it from you. But I am giving you what I can now. I hope it is enough." I cried reading that note. Because it was not about the money or the house. It was about her finally claiming me. Finally saying, "You are my daughter." Finally giving me what she should have given me 65 years ago. Her acknowledgement. Her love. Her life. I am 67 years old now. Patricia died 2 years ago. I still live 3 doors down from her house. I could not bring myself to sell it. I go there sometimes. I sit in her living room. I look at her things. I feel her presence. I miss her. I wish we had had more time. I wish she had told me the truth from the beginning. I wish we had had 65 years instead of 2. But I am grateful for what we had. Grateful for the time. Grateful for the honesty. Grateful for the forgiveness. I think about her every day. I think about the choices she made. The reasons she hid. The guilt she carried. And I understand. I do not agree with her choices. But I understand them. She was human. She was flawed. She was scared. And she did the best she could with what she had. My children ask me sometimes if I regret forgiving her. I say no. They say even after everything she did. I say even after everything. Because holding on to anger would not have changed anything. It would not have given us more time. It would not have healed the wounds. It would have just made me bitter. And I did not want to be bitter. I wanted to be free. And forgiveness set me free. I found my birth mother at 65 years old. She had been my neighbor for 20 years. She had watched my life from a distance. She had hidden who she was. And when I confronted her, when I demanded answers, she gave them to me. She told me her story. She told me her truth. And slowly, painfully, we built a relationship. We became mother and daughter. Not in the traditional way, but in our way. And it was enough. It was more than I ever thought I would have. And I am grateful. I am grateful I took that DNA test. I am grateful the truth came out. I am grateful for the 2 years we had. I am grateful for the forgiveness. I am grateful for the love. Because even though she gave me away, even though she hid, even though she lied, she was still my mother. And I was still her daughter. And that meant something. It meant everything.